Hi, this is Ken from mytoshgarage.com, and I'd like to show you today how to mount a ZZ4 350 inside of a Fiero engine cradle. What we have here sitting is actually an engine in a transverse mount. The car would actually be facing forward. The engine is sitting crossways inside the Fiero engine cradle. I'd like to zoom in closer to see what we have going on here. We have the ZZ4 mounted to a Fiero 5-speed Getrag transmission. We have a Barry Garant Demon carburetor, a 650 CFM carburetor mounted to the top of the engine, specially calibrated specifically for this crate motor. Scanning down, we have Sanderson CC90 headers that have a 1 5/8 inch primary, not an 1.5 inch, collecting into a 3-inch collector, being able to provide the greatest amount of air passage coming from the headers. So the headers are ceramic coated to be able to run as cool as possible, as opposed to actually wrapping the headers. The ceramic coating is the way to go there. As we look down a little bit, I created a specific engine mount that goes directly to the block that's mounted to the engine cradle. Very solid. And what we have going on here, that is actually an upgrade over the V8 Archie kit that I purchased to be able to mount the 350 onto the engine cradle. There's mounts in the front of the engine and into the back as well. Along with the engine cradle, there are red polyurethane bushings on all 4 corners to be able to improve the stability of the engine so it doesn't shake quite as much. Taking a look at the engine, starting from the bottom, we have the brackets that actually mount the engine to the engine cradle. Here we have a thin harmonic balancer which has a belt that drives the air conditioner compressor and the dual pulley alternator. Not very excited about the thin belt. Would love to have a serpentine belt in here to provide a little bit more durability, but don't have room to do it, so this is really what was recommended. Moving on up, the remote water pump, electric water pump, in addition to the mechanical pump, would not fit inside of my kit car, so had to fabricate my own water intake system, which comes down in the center of both of the inlets into the engine to be able to provide equal flow into the engine. So I have a remote water pump mounted on the frame that will be pumping water into this and circulating through the engine and through the rest of the cooling system. In addition to the cooling system, we have here a container mounted on top of the intake system, on top of the thermostat, to be able to reduce the amount of air blockage in the system so that there's not a vapor lock. The air will actually be able to circulate through the system, come to the top of this water collector here, and out through the catch basin that will be mounted on top of that. That should be able to resolve any cooling problems that I have with the car. Moving on to the right, we fabricated our own mounting bracket, and note specifically the remote power steering pump from an '85 Chevette. Being able to run that off of a dual pulley system, off of the alternator. Really excited about being able to show that to you here, because being able to have a power steering pump on a large wheeled Lamborghini Diablo is going to be a necessity. So this is how we're actually going to be able to make that happen. Coming to the other side of the engine, you can see the ceramic coated headers. We got the alternator, we got the remote power steering pump here. We have a high torque starter. We have a remote oil filter system mounted directly above the starter there with easy access to the oil filter. Coming on through, we can see the hard mount transmission adapter here. I'd like to be able to do something in the front of the engine as well, but don't have room for it. The transmission is actually a front-wheel drive 5-speed Getrag and not the typical V6 5-speed Fiero transmission. In order to mount a front-wheel drive transmission, I had to get a conversion kit from Rodney Dickman. He provided some of the brackets to be able to mount your shift and select cables, and being able to actually tie in the clutch slave cylinder. With inside the housing, we have a center force dual friction clutch, a high performance clutch, to be able to make sure that we engage the transmission effectively. Moving on through, we had to extend the wheelbase of the entire car by 3 inches, so we had to extend the axles by 3 inches on each side. We have rebuilt constant velocity joints with the new rubber boots and repacked joints inside of there. We also had to put in a new speedometer gear inside of the transmission to make sure that the speedometer is actually going to be calibrated at the right speed, since it is going to be mounted in the rear of the car, and it was developed for a different type of engine setup. So with all of this, I hope to be able to put this in the car very soon and see how it actually runs and make sure that the transmission will engage and disengage. I hope this has been helpful to see exactly how you would mount a 350 engine inside of a Fiero engine cradle. So thank you very much, and check out my website at mytoshgarage.com.